Science fiction in the 1960s wasn't just a genre, it was a time capsule of human imagination. It was the decade when we reached for the stars, dreamed of other worlds, and feared the ones we might create ourselves. Sure, when people think of 60s sci-fi, they picture The Giants, 2001, A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes, or Fantastic Voyage. Those were the films critics celebrated, the ones that made it into history books. But what about the others, the weird ones, the daring ones? The films that stumbled, confused audiences, or were simply too strange for their time. Buried beneath the big names of the space race era are a dozen forgotten treasures. Films that weren't polished or perfect, but fearless. Some were dismissed as silly, others were ignored entirely, but all of them dared to do something different. So, let's open the vault once again and rediscover 12 forgotten science fiction gems from the 1960s, bold, bizarre, and brilliantly ahead of their time. The Green Slime, 1968. Let's start with chaos, glorious, colorful chaos. The Green Slime is one of those movies that seems impossible to describe without smiling. It's loud, it's weird, and it's the kind of film where everything goes wrong, in the most entertaining way possible. The story begins with astronauts sent to destroy an asteroid headed straight for Earth. Mission accomplished, right? Not quite. On their way back, they unknowingly bring aboard a strange, glowing organism. A pulsating green goo that multiplies and evolves into monstrous creatures with tentacles, flashing eyes, and rubbery limbs. Soon, the crew is trapped aboard a space station swarming with alien slime monsters. Lasers fire, alarms blare, and a psychedelic rock theme song screams in the background. Critics in 1968 rolled their eyes. Too campy, too loud, too ridiculous. But time has been kind to The Green Slime. Fans rediscovered it as a cult classic, a movie that captures the sheer joy of sci-fi excess. It's a Japanese-American co-production between Toei Studios and MGM, blending Hollywood ambition with Japan's love for practical effects and miniatures. The result is a movie that doesn't look like anything else from the era. The monsters are clearly guys in suits, but somehow that only makes it better. It's not realism that keeps it alive, it's personality. The Green Slime is pure spectacle, unashamed and unforgettable. The Creation of the Humanoids, 1962. If The Green Slime is a neon explosion, The Creation of the Humanoids is its quiet, eerie shadow. This small American film barely made a sound when it was released in 1962, but those who've discovered it since call it one of the strangest and smartest sci-fi films ever made. The premise feels like something from a Philip K. Dick novel. After a devastating nuclear war, humanity teeters on the edge of extinction. In an effort to rebuild, survivors create androids known as clickers to help restore civilization. At first, these machines are servants, but over generations, they become more intelligent, more emotional, and disturbingly more human. That's when the fear begins. People start to question what it means to be alive, and whether their creations have replaced them entirely. The movie unfolds almost entirely through dialogue, long, deliberate conversations about consciousness, identity, and free will. It's hypnotic, minimal, and deeply unsettling. When it came out, critics called it stiff and lifeless. But what they missed was how alive its ideas were. It tackles questions about artificial intelligence and human extinction decades before Blade Runner or Ex Machina. Even Andy Warhol was fascinated by it, calling it one of the most thought-provoking films of its time. Today, it feels prophetic, like a 1960s warning about the world we're living in right now. The Last Man on Earth, 1964. If there's one movie that perfectly captures loneliness, it's The Last Man on Earth. Vincent Price stars as Dr. Robert Morgan, the last human survivor of a global plague that's wiped out civilization and turned the rest of humanity into light-fearing creatures. Every morning, he scavenges empty streets, boards up his windows, and buries the infected. Every night, the monsters return, banging on his doors, calling his name. Filmed on the desolate streets of Rome, standing in for an abandoned America, The Last Man on Earth feels hauntingly real. There's no glossy Hollywood sheen here, just crumbling buildings, empty plazas, and a man slowly losing his grip on sanity. Critics in 1964 thought it was too bleak, too strange, too grim. But history had other plans. George Romero later credited this film as his inspiration for Night of the Living Dead. Without The Last Man on Earth, the modern zombie genre might never have existed. Vincent Price delivers one of the most vulnerable performances of his career. Stripped of his usual theatrical charm, he becomes an everyman clinging to routine in a hopeless world. It's not just a horror movie. It's a meditation on solitude, survival, and the fragility of hope. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, 1969. Imagine there's another Earth, identical in every way, orbiting perfectly opposite our own, hidden by the sun. That's the eerie concept behind Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, a stylish British sci-fi film from Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, the creative minds behind Thunderbirds. Two astronauts are sent to explore this mysterious new planet. But when they crash and awaken, everything looks normal, until small details start to go wrong. Words appear backward, clocks run counterclockwise, and slowly, they realize they're on a mirror Earth, where everything is reversed. It's a slow-burn psychological thriller wrapped in a sleek sci-fi shell. Critics dismissed it as confusing and too slow, but its ambition was enormous. The production design, with its glossy spacecraft, shimmering silver suits, and miniature models, still impresses today. Beyond the visuals, Journey to the Far Side of the Sun is about identity. It asks, if you met your reflection, would you even recognize yourself? It's a haunting, underrated classic, a perfect bridge between the pulp adventure of early 60s sci-fi and the existentialism of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Battle Beneath the Earth, 1967. The 60s were an age of Cold War paranoia, and Battle Beneath the Earth took that fear to the extreme. Instead of aliens or asteroids, the threat comes from beneath our feet. A rogue general uncovers a terrifying plot, a network of tunnels stretching under the United States, filled with nuclear warheads ready to strike from below. The film blends military tension with B-movie pulp energy. Imagine a spy thriller with the aesthetics of Thunderbirds and the urgency of Dr. Strangelove. The sets are claustrophobic and humming with energy. Narrow tunnels, flashing red lights, and giant drilling machines. It's over the top, yet strangely compelling. Critics in 1967 laughed it off, but Battle Beneath the Earth captured the mood of its time, an age when everyone feared secret weapons and invisible enemies. It's not just a sci-fi curiosity. It's a cinematic snapshot of Cold War anxiety, where paranoia itself becomes the monster. The Projected Man, 1966. There's something timeless about stories of brilliant scientists who push too far, and The Projected Man is a perfect example. Dr. Paul Steiner dreams of teleporting objects across space, revolutionizing science forever. But when he tests the process on himself, something goes horribly wrong. Instead of success, Steiner emerges disfigured and deadly, his body half-phased, his touch lethal. As he descends into madness, he turns on those who betrayed him, leaving behind a trail of tragedy and revenge. Sure, the special effects are rough and the pacing uneven, but that's part of its charm. The film oozes atmosphere. Rain-drenched London streets, shadowy laboratories, flickering lights. It's gothic sci-fi at its best. Beneath the surface, it's a story about ambition, pride, and the fear of losing control over your own creation. Critics dismissed it as another fly knockoff, but they missed the emotion, the tragic humanity behind the monster. The Projected Man reminds us that sometimes the scariest thing isn't science itself. It's the person who wields it. The Angry Red Planet, 1960. If you've ever wanted to visit Mars, but through the lens of a fever dream, The Angry Red Planet is your ticket. The movie follows a crew of astronauts who travel to the Red Planet, only to discover a world that's as terrifying as it is surreal. Using a unique visual technique called cinemagic, every scene on Mars glows in blazing red hues. Critics called it cheap and gimmicky, but that cheapness is what makes it so unforgettable. The red tint gives the planet an alien, dreamlike quality, as if the entire world exists inside a hallucination. And then there are the creatures, bizarre, unforgettable hybrids. A spider with a bat's face. A tentacled amoeba that devours everything in its path. The Angry Red Planet is a perfect example of imagination triumphing over budget. It's weird, pulpy, and unlike anything else made at the time. A reminder that science fiction doesn't always have to make sense. It just has to make you feel wonder. Moon 02, 1969. Now here's something truly different. A Western, set on the moon. Moon 02, made by Hammer Films, proudly called itself the first space Western. It's got everything: greedy tycoons, space miners, lunar bar fights, and a rugged antihero named Bill Kemp. The story feels like the good, the bad, and the ugly meets 2001, A Space Odyssey. There's adventure, betrayal, and plenty of swagger. Only this time, it's in zero gravity. Visually, it's drenched in 60s color, bright costumes, funky set design, and a jazzy soundtrack that feels straight out of a mod nightclub. Critics didn't get it. They expected serious sci-fi and got a playful mashup instead. But that's exactly what makes it so charming. It's a film that doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's rare for its time. Moon Zero 2 dared to mix genres decades before that became popular, paving the way for later space adventures that combined humor, style, and spectacle. Horror of the Zombies / Assignment Terror, 1969. Now, we dive into the wonderfully bizarre. Horror of the Zombies, also known as Assignment Terror, is the kind of movie that sounds like a fever dream. Aliens resurrecting classic monsters like Frankenstein's creature, werewolves, and mummies to conquer Earth. Yes, that's really the plot. And yes, it's as wild as it sounds. This Spanish-German co-production threw every monster movie trope into a blender and hit go. The results are chaotic, but irresistibly entertaining. Critics were baffled. Too campy for horror fans, too spooky for sci-fi fans. But that's what makes it so special. It doesn't belong to one genre. It's pure imagination, unfiltered and fearless. Horror of the Zombies is a love letter to the monster movies that came before it, and a celebration of how far filmmakers were willing to push the boundaries of the bizarre. The Amazing Transparent Man, 1960. Some films don't need a big budget to make a big impact. The Amazing Transparent Man is one of them. Running just under an hour, this stripped-down thriller follows an ex-con coerced into an experiment that turns him invisible. At first, he sees it as a gift, a way to escape his past and gain power. But as his mind begins to unravel, invisibility becomes a curse. The film's rough edges, its simple sets and minimal effects, give it a noir-like intensity. Shadows stretch across walls, tension builds in whispers, and the story unfolds like a morality tale. Critics dismissed it as a throwaway B-movie. But modern audiences have found something haunting in its simplicity, a warning about the dangers of ambition and the loneliness of unchecked power. Sometimes, the smallest films have the biggest echoes. Night of the Big Heat, 1967. Set on a lonely, windswept island, Night of the Big Heat takes a simple premise, a mysterious heat wave, and turns it into slow-burning sci-fi suspense. Starring British horror legends Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, the film builds tension not with action, but with atmosphere. As the island's temperature rises to unbearable levels, the residents discover the horrifying truth. It's not global warming. It's an alien invasion. The aliens themselves are barely shown, but that's the point. The fear comes from not seeing them, from the dread of knowing they're out there. Critics complained about the pacing, but that deliberate slowness is what gives it power. It's claustrophobic, haunting, and loaded with subtext about human denial and fragility. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones we see. They're the ones we feel closing in. Panic in Year Zero, 1962. And we end with a film that's frighteningly real. Directed by and starring Ray Milland, Panic in Year Zero tells the story of an ordinary family who head out for a weekend camping trip, only to see Los Angeles destroyed by nuclear bombs. What follows isn't science fiction fantasy. It's human survival at its rawest. As civilization collapses, the family is forced to fight for food, protection, and their own morality. The father, once a mild-mannered man, turns ruthless, doing whatever it takes to keep his family alive. Filmed in stark black and white, it feels less like a movie and more like a documentary of society falling apart. There are no heroes, no happy endings, just desperation. Critics in 1962 didn't like its harsh tone. But today, Panic in Year Zero stands as one of the most realistic and chilling portrayals of nuclear apocalypse ever made. It's a reminder that the end of the world doesn't need aliens or spaceships, just human nature. And there we have it, 12 forgotten sci-fi gems from the 1960s. From psychedelic monsters to mirror Earths, invisible men to lunar cowboys. These films remind us why the 60s were such a golden age of imagination. They didn't always get it right. Some were campy, some clumsy, some completely out of control. But they dared, and that's what makes them special. They prove that science fiction has never been just about special effects or box office numbers. It's about asking questions, about exploring fears, dreams, and possibilities. So next time you think of 60s sci-fi, look beyond the blockbusters and dive into the weird, the wonderful, and the overlooked. Because sometimes the movies that critics forgot are the ones that remind us why we fell in love with cinema in the first place.